Hello everyone, welcome to How to Play Like a WoP Pro, episode number 23. Today we're going to talk about how to track enemy tanks from a variety of angles with both AP and with heat. Now if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll see what I mean in a second. So oftentimes people will have heat loaded and then they'll be facing an angle something like this against an enemy tank, and they'll think that they can't pen the enemy tank with heat shells. At least they can pen the enemy tank, but they can't track and pen the enemy tank. So here I'm just showing you that first of all I can pen this angle with AP, but when I load heat, I'm not able to do so. And that's kind of obvious. One of the very common pieces of advice that you'll get in World of Tanks is don't shoot tracks with heat. But that's not always the case. There are many times when you have a tracking shot on an enemy tank with heat, whether you know it or not. And so here's an example of me penning Tengu. Thank you Tengu, by the way, for helping me out with this episode. With heat shells through his track and tracking him at the same time. And now there's a second thing I want to show you as well. And it's the fact that you don't have to shoot through someone's track in order to track them all the time. There are times where you can shoot through an enemy's hull and also track them, where your shell penetrates their hull first and then their track secondarily. And the most common way that this happens is you see the outside of someone's hull, like I'm showing in this example right now. So as you can see here, if I fire at the edge of his hull, I track him with the same shot that I do damage with. And this isn't something that you're going to find very useful very often, but it is something that you definitely should know about. Now here I'm just going to show again that you can indeed shoot through the track and do damage. I'm kind of showing you the different angles here. Of course, if I was directly on the side of this S-Conch, like right here, from this angle, I would be able to pen his track with heat as well. But really when it comes to penning tracks with heat and dealing damage at the same time, it really just all depends on the angle. And the thing that really matters is the thickness between the track and the hull. So when I'm aiming here, you can see my reticle is red. And that's because there's a long distance between this spaced armor of the track and the hull. But when I decrease that distance by driving forward, you'll be able to see that I can actually shoot through both the track and the hull. Now before I do that, I'm gonna show you again that I can shoot through his outside hull and pen his track, even with heat shells as well. The heat shell just goes through and penetrates the track, or I should say damages the track. But now I'm gonna show you again. It just depends on the angle of where you're shooting. That's what determines whether you can pen through the track or not. And so here, when I move my reticle to the right of this spot right here, then it's not a pen because I'm shooting through too much track and I'm hitting his side hull. If I shoot right here, it's yellow, and this is like a 90% pen, probably even more than that. So right there it's red, right here it's yellow, and as you can see it pens. And really what this comes down to is you trying this out and using your pen indicator to know when you're able to pen the enemy's tracks and deal damage at the same time. And it really depends on which tank you're shooting. So for example, if you're shooting a Churchill 7, its tracks stick out very far, and so you have to make sure that you're actually shooting somewhere through the tracks that there's a hitbox behind it, relatively close. The hitbox can't be very far behind where you penetrate the track. And so I'm going to show you another replay just to kind of expand on that point. So here we are again with Tengu. This time he's in his cron, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what it looks like on a different armor model to show you that this isn't always the case. You can't always pen through the track, and that's really where the damage indicator comes in. You have to use the damage indicator to know whether you're going to pen or not, and if not that, then you need experience. And experience is what I rely on the most to tell me whether I can pen someone through the track or not easily. So here I'm just showing you I can't pen there on the track and it doesn't do any damage. I take out his track of course, but it doesn't do any damage. Now here you can see it's yellow. And usually when it's yellow and you're shooting through the track, it's usually like a 90% pen, but not always. So you just have to keep that in mind. It comes down to experience and knowing your armor models. Now here I'm going to try to track him by shooting the outside of his hull, shooting out as far out as I can go. But as you can see, I don't actually hit his track hitbox, so it doesn't track him. So that's what I'm talking about, where it really depends on what tank you're facing, whether or not you can pen them with damage and track them at the same time by shooting the outside of their hull. Like for on the 277, for example, the hull is sloped on the corners here like this. It's sloped downwards. So if you're shooting the outside of a 277 hull, you're probably not going to pen and do damage just because of the steep slope of the hull. But other times it's because the track is too far out from the armor model, like on the Kron here. I think I'd try again with AP. No, I'm loading heat. I think this shot bounces. Yeah, it does. But as you can see, it bounced off his hull and tracked him. So his track hitbox, at least the corner of his track, is like out here. So if I shoot through his hull, even if it penetrates, I don't track him. But on some tanks, especially a tank like the VZ, I've noticed that you can shoot the outside of its hull and it will track that tank a lot, the VZ that is. Here I'm just kind of experimenting, looking at what kind of angles will work and which ones won't. Another thing to mention is there are a lot of tanks, especially German tanks like the Jagdpanzer E100 and the E100, where you can shoot directly through the tracks and up into the hull of the bottom side of the hull of the tank. So on the Jagdpanzer E100, if you shoot it right about here in this little square of the track, even on flat ground, you can do damage and track him at the same time. Here I'm trying a slightly different angle, it doesn't work. To be fair, I didn't know whether or not this would be the case before I tested this in the training room. I'm just trying stuff out. But most of the time I usually do know whether it will track or not. And that just comes down to experience and the pen indicator, as I said before. There, it still doesn't hit the track. And I think I show one more example of me using heat to shoot through the track. So as you can see, even at this angle, I can still shoot through shoot through here, and it will still pen the upper side of his hull. So when you're shooting through a track like this, like especially a close side track, the track that is closest to you, when you're on the side of an enemy tank, just keep in mind how far behind the hull model is. So here it's green, but if I aim at the very edge of the track, there's a lot of distance between the edge of the track and the hull here, so it's red. But the Kron has pretty thin side armor, so it's really easy to both track it and deal damage with heat shells when you're shooting at its side. There are other tanks like a T95, when you're shooting at its side, like for example its rear drive wheel, if you don't have APCR or AP loaded, it's very hard to track and deal damage unless you hit it at a very precise angle. Like for example right here on the 277, if you shoot like right here, it's not a guaranteed pen with heat, or especially if it's like this, it's not a guaranteed pen with heat. But if you shoot this corner right here, it will track and do damage. So just learn these little things about each and every tank, when you can track them and at what angles, and I think it will help you a lot in your battles. Thank you for watching. I should have a weak spot video out pretty soon, so I hope you guys will enjoy that. That's all. See you guys later.